Tim Stenovec, record day for the Dow. I know you love the Dow. You're an old economy guy.
Hey,
record day for the
special.
S&P 500. And look at this. The Russell 2000, Tim, at one point came about 40 points away from getting a record high.
It's pretty remarkable to see. Just think about how much different things were a week ago, guys. How much uncertainty there was out there. There was a lot of concern that we'd be sitting here a week, later, that we wouldn't have a presidential choice. It wouldn't be a clear victory for either party. Well, look, it was a red wave, and investors certainly like that. We're going to see maybe the best week for the S&P 500 in a very long time, Jess.
And of course, Romaine just brought up when it's looking at small caps, Russell 2000. But if you look today, it's actually November 8th. On November 8th, 3 years ago, so in 2021, that was the last time that it actually had hit that all-time high. So it's been a tough stretch there for small caps, but it'll be interesting to see also the trajectory of what happens with rates now, because that's obviously highly indebted, more domestically focused companies. So when investors were thinking we'd see more rate cuts next year, now they're bringing them back in depending on what happens in Washington and policies, guys.
Yeah, to Tim's point, event risk has pretty much disappeared. It's concluded, and you see a surge in volume as well. Volume in the Dow is 38% above the 20-day average. Now, we should note that the Dow is no longer so old school. It does have NVIDIA, after all, starting today.
Yeah, it's getting there. It's catching up with the times. Good to see they're still sticking by just 30 stocks here as a representation for the entire economy.
And price-weighted.
We should also point out that here, when we talk about what a wild week it was, the VIX having one of its biggest point drops on a weekly basis in quite some time, showing that at least the outlook here for volatility has certainly been tamped down. A lot to cheer about on the day and on the week. BlackRock ringing the bell there over at the NYSE as the Dow Jones Industrial Average closes out the day just below that 44,000 mark. It did trade slightly above that earlier in the session, but still up about 0.6% record high. The S&P traded slightly above 6,000 as well, going to close just below it at 5,996. Up about 0.4%. The NASDAQ up fractionally by about 0.1%. Look at the Russell 2000, only 17 points added, only 0.7%, but at 23.99 and change, Tim, it is now the closest it's ever been to reclaiming that record high in about 3 years.
Well, let's take a deeper look in the S&P 500. Peeling back the layers, 317 stocks did move higher in the S&P 500. 184, Scarlet, moved lower today.
And of the groups that did advance, 5 of them climbed at least 1%. So you had utilities, real estate investment trusts, and consumer staples, more of the defensive sectors, gaining all at least 1.5%. On the downside, materials, communication services, and tech actually did finish in the red.
All right, let's go to some of the gainers that I have for you today. I do want to start with Tesla. Shares of Tesla popping today by more than 8%, and that brings it to a market cap of more than $1 trillion in value for the first time, going all the way back to 2022. Investors continue to bet that Trump's return to the White House can be a positive force for the company, considering his now very close relationship with Elon Musk. We did see that shares closed just about 30% higher just this week, guys. So really a big move for Tesla so far this week. Huge.
Can I just say, too? Because I mean, and I don't want to get too into politics, but this is going to go down.
I'll play.
It's probably one of the biggest gambles, right, that he made. Because there was a lot of people that when he aligned himself with Trump, I'm talking Elon Musk, they were saying, okay, this guy's, bad idea. But obviously, this is going to be a huge benefit for him, assuming he stays in Trump's good graces over the next 4 years.
Well, I wonder how that benefit will manifest. Look, I think you're right that it was a huge bet, and it was one that instantly became clear was a winner, at least for Elon Musk's personal
potentially
fortune.
Lower regulation on the EV side, potentially an acceleration of robo-taxis and other things that are going to require some sort of government involvement. Obviously, he's got SpaceX, which is pretty much just a government contractor at this point. So, yeah, I mean, obviously no promises, but I mean, you can see where this is going to go.
And maybe a side gig as well, right, at the government.
Maybe if he wants that. I mean, Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, right, as we've heard about and he's talked about. But at the same time, if you look at the history that Donald Trump has had with people who have been close to him, it has sometimes been tumultuous. I wonder if...
Yeah, we're not talking about that just yet.
Look,
it's optimism week here, Tim.
It's still the honeymoon period,
we'll
right?
get there. We'll get there at some point. But yes, your point is taken.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about Axon Enterprises. It's a parent company that makes police gear, including body cameras and tasers. Shares of Axon Enterprises surged today, higher today by more than 26%, higher by more than 28%. Look at that, almost 30%
what's going
higher
on?
this year.
Are we tasing more people or something?
Well, the company did raise its full-year outlook after third quarter results beat expectations. They also touted this AI era plan. I'm not going to make a Taylor Swift eras joke here, but for Axon, the taser maker. It is the AI era. Investors obviously are excited about that, sending shares higher by close to 30%. We saw at least 8 Wall Street analysts raising their price targets for Axon shares, data compiled by Bloomberg show. And one more on the President-elect. Trump Media and Technology shares moved higher today by more than 15%. They were a little all over the place today. There was a volatility halt. The former president and president-elect did send out a post saying that he has no plans to sell shares in it. The company also earlier this week, we should note, disclosed that it had lost $19 million in the third quarter on revenue of just $1 million. Net losses piling to $363 million in the first 9 months of the year. The valuation is more than $6 billion. Many people do argue this is detached from fundamentals.
Well, since I'm wearing red, guys, I'll go ahead and take those decliners. So the worst performer in the S&P 500 today, Akamai Technologies, actually falling after its results and lowering its outlook when it comes to its profit forecast. Also, if you look at its stock, down 14%, worst day since July 2017. This is a computer and internet technology consulting services company. Its market cap's around roughly $14 billion here. If you look at the A&R function, it has 15 buys, 8 holds, and 1 sell. Moving over, though, looking at Pinterest. So this, of course, reported earnings after the bell yesterday, also down 14%. Pins is the ticker symbol on this, worst day since July 31st here. Of course, the image sharing platform sank after weak ad trends were weighing on its revenue forecast, specifically for the current quarter and the fourth quarter. Morgan Stanley analysts flagged weaknesses in food and beverage ad spending. So that's what's weighing on that stock. And then finally, Sweetgreen, ticker symbol SG on this, down about 6%. Worst day since October 17th. So just a few weeks ago was that worst day, but the market is punishing it after Salad Chain actually reported a wider than expected loss for the third quarter. Unfortunately, the results failed to meet those high expectations, guys.
All right, let's take a look at yields here because we did see a lot of activity there, but forget what happened on Wednesday. Remember, you had that huge pop in yields on the back of the re-election of President Donald Trump, but that actually faded. And right now, we're talking about yields once again actually moving in the direction that a lot of people, well, weren't betting on. In fact, we're actually closing out on the 10-year yield at 4.3%. That's below where we were last Friday here. We had a move of about 2 basis points lower on the day, about 7 to 8 basis points on the week. We should point out the 2-year yield, though, the more rate-sensitive part of the yield curve, Fed-sensitive part of the yield curve, that's still staying elevated here on the week, up for a second straight week, those yields.
Hey, you guys remember congestion pricing?
No. Did it ever happen?
It did never happen.
I saw they put up these big things around New York. They're like these tolls.
They spent most of their money on that.
Did they ever turn them on?
They did not turn them on.
Oh.
Yeah, there was
So we
this
wasted money on
abrupt
that?
shift by Governor Kathy Hochul just a few months ago. Well, it turns out that Politico is reporting maybe there's going to be a revival of this plan. It's going to be a little different, though, than the $15 to enter certain parts of Manhattan now that the election has passed, Jess. And they're looking at, what, $9
That's
polls,
right.
perhaps?
So looking at
Bargain.
$9 poll
$9.
here, according to one of the people that the story said, and it was an MTA board member. So $9. So that would actually, the plan would lower it by 15 and obviously require a lengthy environmental review.
Of course it would. Of course it would.
Well, no. Well, this is my understanding is that there's this range from $9 to $23. So since it's at the lowest end of the range, maybe the Hochul administration and the MTA can avoid another lengthy environmental review, and they could implement this before Trump actually goes to the White House, because there's some federal concerns too.
Really compressed timeline for a municipal government or in a state government. But the other thing that we need to keep in mind is they had all these exemptions carved out for people, right? Does that change if the toll is something different? And can the MTA still sell bonds tied to the revenue coming in for all this congestion pricing?
And that's the thing I think gets lost on this. I mean, we all could be outraged about tolls, but at the end of the day, this was money that was really supposed to go to improve the subway system here in New York. I don't know the last time you folks have been on the subway, but
each and every day.
I can say this with confidence.
Charlie Pellet.
It needs improvement.
Yeah, it does need some improvement. Something else that we've been tracking here is, of course, the rally in financials on the election of Donald Trump. He's seen as positive for the sector overall because of deal making and, of course, lower regulation, consolidation in the industry. But on a personal level, for a lot of the CEOs at these firms, it's going to be really good news, because if their stock continues to move up, they have bonuses that are tied to certain stock levels.
Yeah.
And so someone like Harvey Schwartz could get more money in his bonus, his discretionary pay, if the stock moves a certain level.
Yeah,
Another 10%.
Good for him. I mean, look, get your money. I don't think these guys needed it, but it gets to this idea, though, too, of kind of the industries that we know, or at least have a good insights that are going to benefit here, potentially from the Trump administration. And I think that's a big part of the price action that we've seen, Tim, over the last 3 days.
So $9 versus $15 for these guys doesn't really matter?
I'm not sure they're thinking about that.
Control?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Tim, you don't drive anyway, right? You just bike everywhere.
Bike and walk and take the subway. It's New York. It's too crowded to drive.
Thank you. That's what I tell.
It's too crowded.
Yeah, y'all don't
Too
want me
much
driving on the
traffic.
streets.
Too much traffic. Hey, guys, congratulations on a big week. Romaine, good to have you back.
Survived it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
We did.
I think I've counted up, Tim. I think I got about 6.5 hours of sleep all week long.
Well, I hope you get some rest this
total.
weekend. It was nice checking in with you from Michigan over these past few days.
I drank a whole bottle of wine last night.
As you should. Well deserved.
Right.
Not even the weekend yet. All right. Well, good to see you guys. That is going to do it for our cross-platform coverage. Have a great weekend, everyone. We'll see you right back here, same time, same place on Monday.